Hi guys, in this video I'm just going to walk you through the very quick installation steps required to install the new Vagabond Motorsports Cargo rack for the 2017 Honda Grom. Just to give you a quick overview of the Vagabond Motorsports rack for the new Honda Grom, just to be totally clear, this is for the new body style Grom, the one with the twin or the double stack LED headlights. US market, that's 2017 model year and newer. There's a couple international countries out there that released it a year earlier, so it's a 2016 model year. This is for the new body style, not the first generation, second generation Grom. So for this rack, it's a two-piece design, kind of a trim plate mount on the bottom, and then the cargo rack top side. You can see for this year's Grom, or this body style Grom, the top plate's actually tapered back, so it actually flows really well with the body lines of the motorcycle. But both pieces are CNC laser cut and CNC formed from 1/8 inch thick steel. They're galvanized and then UV resistant satin black powder coated, so it's a very durable finish. It's got threaded inserts on the front two holes, clearance holes for the rear two holes on the mount, and that's to adapt any number of our Fender Eliminators. And then the tail section on the kind of load deck has 6 more M6, so a metric 6mm tapped holes, threaded inserts pressed into the top flange, so you can mount a GV case, you can mount a milk crate, you can buy one of our clamp plates and mount kind of anything you can possibly clamp down. So it's a very flexible design. Some of the kind of novel features are on our side flanges here. There's actually through holes, so you can hook in more bungee cords and tie downs to hold stuff to the rear portion of the seat. And then you can see there's on this trim plate, much like our standalone Fender Eliminator, these two kind of wings that come up, and all this kind of comes together to fill in all the gaps that taking the factory fender off opens up. And so to be perfectly clear, you do need one of our Fender Eliminators to run this cargo rack, unless you just want no license plate at all. And for that reason, we sell this cargo rack in 3 configurations. So we sell it standalone, and that's really for people who already have one of our Fender Eliminators, whether it's the kind of OEM grade one or whether it's the just the license plate mount for using integrated tail light. So we just sell standalone, and then we sell it as a kit to kind of get a better value. Both with one configuration of the kit is with our kind of OEM grade Fender Eliminator that reuses the stock license plate light and turn signals. That's a really popular setup, and these two pieces work really well together. So you can see these two studs come up through these two clearance holes in the trim plate. And the third configuration you can purchase this rack in is the license plate configuration. So that's going to be the rack and our license plate, and that's for the scenarios where you're running an integrated tail light and you don't want any other light. So it's a really kind of smooth underside appearance. We'll go over all these installations in this video, but it's very configurable. The last note on all these configurations is going to be the hardware kit that's included with the rack is going to be the same no matter what configuration you get it. And so if you buy the standalone rack, it's going to come with this hardware kit, and if you already have one of our Fender Eliminators, you already have all this hardware and you probably don't need to use any of it. If you get the kit with the Fender Eliminator, the kind of full lights OEM style Fender Eliminator, you're going to use all the hardware in this kit. You're going to use the grommet, you're going to use these washers, which are used as spacers for the license plate light, and you're going to use the 2 flange nuts, which are going to go on these 2 studs. The last note is if you get the license plate version only, you will need these 2 nuts to connect this to the tail section of the motorcycle. You will not need the 2 stainless steel washers because there is no license plate light in which to tighten up. And then you will also get that rubber grommet, and you won't by default need that rubber grommet in this oval unless you're running some electrical wires out. So if you're running an aftermarket license plate light or something else, you may want to use this grommet. Otherwise, if you're just running the license plate standalone, you probably don't need that grommet. So it's more clear in the written instructions that come with each kit in terms of what you need and what you don't need. But hopefully you can tell this kit is the cargo rack is very configurable. And it's the same kind of story as far as tools you're going to need for this installation. So if you already have one of our Fender Eliminators installed on your bike, and all you're doing is taking that off, taking the trim plate off, and reinstalling it with our cargo rack, all you're really going to need is 12mm socket and needle nose pliers to help you kind of pull the bullet connectors and put them back on. Now, if you're starting from scratch, when I say scratch, I mean with a factory rear fender, you're going to need all the tools that our Fender Eliminator kit needs, which is another 8mm socket, needle nose pliers, and that's going to be used to break down the rear fender shell. Then a 14mm open end, that's for the turn signals, OEM turn signals, and a 10mm. And the Phillips is going to be used for both the fender shell and with the 10mm, because that's usually what is used for your license plate hardware in terms of the 10mm lock nut on the back side of those bolts. So kind of depending on what kit or setup you're going to run, you either need a portion or all of these tools. So in the interest of saving time, we're going to jump right to the part in the installation where you've pulled your factory rear fender, and that means the seat's off, the fender's off, it's all broken down, disconnected from the wiring, and this is true even if you've got our Fender Eliminator on here, you've pulled it off at this point. And if you need help with that step, we recommend you check out our other videos for the Fender Eliminator installation. And the only thing you're going to keep when you're pulling off your factory rear fender is you're going to keep 2 of your factory flanged bolts. So those are important because we're going to use 2 of them at the front side of the rack mount, and so keep those 2 when you remove your factory rear fender. Now before we get into the installation process for the kind of OEM style Fender Eliminator, which is going to be the more popular, really quickly we'll go over the much faster process for the integrated turn or integrated tail light style solution, where all you're going to be wanting to do is mount your license plate but still use our rack. So start with the rack body. You can see there's going to be 2 teeth on the front. Those are actually going to slide into 2 pockets in the front of the bike. But the way you install these racks is you kind of go up like this, slide it around the tail section, and there's going to be this rectangular cutout is going to slide over that hump. So kind of get it set, but you'll see that way you won't kind of bang into your plastics or anything like that. So it should seat really clean, really flush, and once you got it in position, you can actually mount it with just the front 2 bolts. So grab 2 of your factory flange bolts. These are the factory bolts, not the ones that Vagabond sends you, and screw those guys in. And with the integrated style license plate, you can actually tighten these guys. So that's obviously not structural because only 2 are set up, but it's good to walk away at that point. Now, really fast installation. Take your license plate mount and 2 of the black flanged hex nuts that are included, and these 2 studs are going to go through those 2 clearance holes. So slide them up through the clearance holes, and put a couple threads on each before you get to it with a tool, especially a power tool. Oops. But you can see that's for the solution where no turn signals except those built into the integrated turn or tail light, but super clean, and that's going to be one option for the cargo rack. Now with that quick aside out of the way, let's get to what's likely the most popular version of this kind of rack combo, which is with our standard Fender Eliminator, reuses the factory turn signals and license plate light. And as part of that installation, so you can see it's already populated with the lights. Again, I would say go back if you need help with that part of the process. Go back to our standard Fender Eliminator installation instructions and get yourself to the point where the Fender Eliminator body is fully populated with the lights. you've got the harness pushed all the way, or get the harness together, and you've got that grommet that we supply rolled all the way over, all the way past the bullets. At that point, we're ready to put this together with the rack. And those two stainless steel washers that are included in the hardware kit are used as part of the license plate light installation to tighten up those bushings, because they're just awfully sloppy from the factory. So once you've got yourself to this point, all we have to do is thread the wiring loom through that oval hole in the cargo rack. Start with the big white connector and pull your glossy black covers through separately. And then once you get the bullet connectors through, what I would recommend is get everything on a nice flat surface. And you can kind of put your Fender Eliminator here, because you have to work a little hard to get this grommet in. So with it kind of set up like this, you can go about the process of cramming that grommet into the oval. And it's not a super easy thing to do, but be patient, work your way around the oval. You very well may have to flip it and check for little wrinkles like that. You just pull the, kind of flip it up, and you can get, should be able to get the whole thing through and nice and well seated. At this point, with it kind of like captured, a little bit dangling, it's actually a good point to take it to the bike. You can pull the rest of the cabling through once the cargo rack body's already mounted to the motorcycle. It'll make things actually much easier. Now when you go to install the rack onto the motorcycle, the only thing you're going to need to have handy are two of the factory 12mm flange bolts. So those are going to go in the front two holes of your cargo rack, and that's the first thing we're going to put in. So get those two bolts and your 12mm wrench prepared, and then you can kind of carry, so you can see we've got kind of this Fender Eliminator portion of the combo is kind of dangling, and that's actually not a bad thing, because it gives us room to do what we need to do. So start by threading all your wiring through that rectangular hole in the tail section of the motorcycle. So we've got the first connector and the boots, and we'll tidy up all the wiring topside after we get the rack installed. So once we've got to this point, you want a little bit of gap so that you can kind of, this is clear in the video, you kind of rotate the top side of the rack over the tail section like that. Don't try to start low. So that will help you get over the hump, and once you've got it over that little bump, you won't have banged up any of your plastics, and you kind of hold it up with one hand. You should see everything kind of line itself up in terms of holes visible through the subframe, and then go ahead and sink in. You don't have to go full tight, but snug up the front two factory bolts, and that'll actually give a nice start to get really stable. And then the only other bit you have to do is, without pulling the grommet out, kind of, you can see and kind of jiggle it back and forth, and you'll feed up the last of that cable. Just be patient, and then line up the two holes, and I'm going to pull the rest of that wiring through. So get all your wiring pulled through, and then you're going to use the two flange nuts that were included in the kit. So you're going to put your two flange nuts on those back two studs. And so what I recommend is get them screwed on like a thread or so that once you put the wrench to it or a power driver, you don't risk cross-threading them. So we've got the Fender Eliminator portion make sure nothing's pinching, and then go ahead and tighten that. And you're all set. Now, if you've got it, we always recommend for load bearing stuff to set a torque. You can either go, these are M8 bolts, so they've got a fair amount of strength to them, but on both the nuts and the bolts, we recommend a 23 foot-pound torque, which is pretty standard for an M8 fastener, but that'll really snug everything up. So you can go pretty tight on these guys. Obviously, we don't want you to rip anything out, but because this is your primary load path, so 23 foot-pounds, it's right around 31 Newton meters, depending on what kind of torque wrench you've got. And just go around like any 4-bolt pattern. Give it a quick star just to make sure that one thing's not tightening another, or sorry, loosening another. So tighten everything up. Torque wrench is totally optional. Otherwise, just give it a nice pull on it, and there'll be a little bit of give based on the design of the rack in terms of that flat plate. So there will be a little spring to it, but you definitely don't want anything to feel loose. And then the last bit is obviously going to be you can pull your tape. You're not worried about dropping anything down the frame spars. And then tidy up the wiring. And the wiring for this, thankfully you've got this big tail section side to tuck like a service loop in, but you have to make your 4-pin connection at the front and then pull that black boot through as well. And then what I like to do is for this installation is keep your front connector kind of where it was before. Use as much of the guides as possible, and then you can shove all this big loop through this clip at the back. It does start to get a little tight, but I don't recommend trying to do that in that white clip, because you won't be able to splay it out. So make your service loop, and it's pretty easy to tuck in a loop. And as long as you're nowhere near kind of rubbing on a seat tube or your seat latches, I really wouldn't sweat it kind of how exactly you route it. But keep it in mind, try to make it go around the frame spars in a nice smooth turn, and then tuck it in around your side panel. So I've got the seat on, right about done with the installation, and a good time to point out that one of the really cool things about the Vagabond Motorsports racks is this 6-hole pattern. Not only is it good for kind of doing whatever you want with respect to clamping stuff down, but it does match up with setup on the GV monolock cases. So GV cases come with these little square washers with slotted inserts, and this is the pattern with the two up front and the furthest right and left, and then this almost furthest back, slightly closer together. That's going to pick up these holes and these holes, so that 4-bolt pattern will line up directly, and that way you don't have to use GV's clamps, so it's way more secure in terms of theft and all that kind of stuff, because it's impossible to yank off. And so you can just thread fasteners directly into those holes and put your trim plate back on, and then you'll have a really secure mount for a rear trunk. So after you get the rack on, just all you need to do is seat and license plate. And it's always good to do a quick systems check, make sure your lights and your blinkers and all that kind of stuff still is functional. I'm going to give you a couple views kind of around the side of the bike, because you can tell our rack, because it's kind of got a nice truss structure, really does an obscure visibility to your rear tail light. So it's good news with the rack. With that, I want to say thank you guys for watching this video. Our products can be had directly on our website, www.vagabondmotorsports.com, as well as Amazon and eBay. Feel free to let us know if you have questions or concerns in the comments below. Thanks again.